Today is Friday, September 30th, 2022. The reason I'm telling you that is because I do not know yet when this video is going to come out, but we are finally getting back to working on Mr. Newman's first gen here behind us. We've been waiting for some stuff for a really long time, and I just got word that the rear end is shipping out next week. So really excited to get that. That's one of the last major components that we've been waiting on. So now what we need to do, now that we know that that's inbound, we need to pull this motor back out one final time so I can get his frame and firewall prepped for paint. We're going to be doing a manual master cylinder on this, and so when we take the big vacuum booster first gen style off there, the paint's going to be, pretty ugly in there behind it. So we just want to, while we have the motor out, give the firewall a fresh new paint job. I'll get my dad over here to do that, and then going to go ahead and get the frame cleaned up from all the stuff we've grinded and welded on and cut and fabricated and spliced. Get that cleaned up good, get a fresh coat of paint on the frame, so that way this thing will be looking proper when it goes back together. So today, I'm just gonna work on getting the motor ready to come out and hopefully get the engine out of this thing today. So let's jump into that. So that wraps up everything that needed to come off on the front side to be able to get this thing out. If you remember, we have those pin-in engine mounts, so when I get ready to pull it out and I have the hoist hooked up to it, I'll just pull the 4 pins and then the motor will be ready to come out. So everything's done up front, so now let's go underneath and get the mock-up transmission transfer case out and everything we got to get out there so we can get ready to start yanking this thing out. I promise you, I get more nervous pulling an engine than I do striping in to go down the racetrack. So there we have it, engine is out. We have so much more room for activities now. This will be the last time the motor comes out of this thing. It's got it sitting over there under the cover. It'll be the last time until it goes back in for good. So now we got it out. I just have a couple little things to finish welding on the engine saddles, the engine mount saddles. I got to rip all of this factory brake line out of here, get rid of that master cylinder, and then basically we're going to strip this firewall, not like down to bare metal, but like get all the stuff off of it, and then we will prep this thing for paint, and my dad will come in and repaint the firewall, make it all nice and new and shiny, and then after that I'll start prepping all of the frame here up front, including the front axle, for paint as well, so that way this thing will be looking fresh, it'll be looking proper, and then at this time also, you know, I'll do the final finishes on all of these edges that I've made through here. So pretty much just prepping for final assembly at this point. So I saved you guys the pain of a time lapse while I was doing a little bit of fabrication and final welding. That stuff is just, it doesn't correlate well in a time lapse because it's a lot of back and forth, checking fitment, just doesn't look good in a time lapse. So let me show you guys what I did in the meantime. So if you remember in some of the earlier videos when I did the engine saddle mounts, you remember me talking about wanting to put some gussets on them, some braces. Half of the reason for the braces is just because there's no way to 360 weld everything. And anytime you can't 360 weld, it's a good idea to do some braces. But the other reason is because of the way that the engine torques over. So you'll notice that I did vertical down on this side. So from the saddle to the frame rail on this side. And then on the driver's side here, I did from the saddle to the frame rail at the top. And the reason that I did that is because of the way that the engine is trying to torque over. It's trying to pull that side up, and it's trying to push this side down. So I didn't want a push-pull on the gussets. I wanted them both to be pushing. So it would have to collapse these gussets and collapse those at the same time in order for it to move. And it's just not going to do that. So other than that, got a couple other things. Cleaned up the frame rail here. Straighten this up, cut this up a little bit so that way it's easier to put the motor in and out. Same thing over here on this side. And then if you remember from the earlier videos where I was talking about notching the frame rail, instead of just doing a notch, I went ahead and took a bunch of material out of this, so it's just a nice smooth transition, looks more factory. And pretty much just got all the rough edges cleaned up, made sure that all the welding's done. So now we can start prepping this baby out for paint. So that is going to be the next thing. I got most of the firewall prepped out. I need 2 people to help me take that block off plate because it's just bolts and nuts, so can't do it by myself. But my dad's going to be coming here this week to paint the firewall for us. And then right after that, we will be painting the whole frame, front axle, the knuckles the best we can. The knuckles we can touch up when we go in and do the race brakes. But essentially everything from the bottom of the cab forward is going to be getting a nice fresh coat of paint. So this thing will be looking really proper. Finally got this thing all prepped out underneath here for paint. If any of you guys have ever done paint work before, you know it takes forever, and one of those things that doesn't correlate well on a time lapse, so I saved you guys from that again. I have a solid 8 hours just in prepping this thing for paint. That's not fab work or welding or cutting or grinding. That's just prepping the underneath of the cab and from the back of the cab basically forward on the frame rails and the front axle to get this thing ready for paint. So very painstaking process, not fun work, but work that has to be done to make something look nice. So let me show you guys what I did. It was daylight when I started this project, and now it's starting to get dark out there, so lighting might not be the best, but got everything basically from the rear cross member forward, all sanded up, all cleaned up, all the grease out of the underneath of this thing, getting it ready to lay down some nice slick paint. When I do the paint process, I'll tell you guys exactly what I like to use on the chassis stuff. It fills really well. It hides a lot of imperfections and stuff like frames and cast pumpkins, rear end housing, whatever you want to call it. It's really good stuff and it's not expensive. So when we get to the paint process, I'll tell you guys all that. But basically, we got this baby all cleaned up and ready to lay some black paint down tomorrow. So the reason that I washed this thing before we start the paint process, two reasons here actually. One, anytime that you have dirt and dust trapped underneath a car cover or anything, it's just more chance for contaminants to get into the paint. But the main reason here was because this thing has been in a fab type environment for so long now that there's a lot of dust all over the truck, you know, metal dust, paint dust, just all kinds of dust that you don't want to be on there when you go dragging a car cover across this thing to cover it up. And when I say car cover, I'm not talking like what you guys are probably commonly familiar with, the cloth style stuff. This is a plastic sheet that goes over a car or truck anytime that you're painting it. So you don't want to go dragging that across. Metal dust being on the paint, it'll tear the paint up. So gave this thing a nice quick bath, and then we had to make sure that it was very, very dry. There can't be any water between the paint and the car cover because it could cause a lifting issue with the paint. And that goes for even normal car covers. Like if you're storing your vehicle, make sure you don't put that thing on a wet vehicle or you could have some serious paint problems with that. So 00 Dave, aka Super Dave, aka Mr. Body, aka my dad, he'll be over here to get the painting here very shortly. So I'll turn this thing back on when we start getting this thing all masked up and ready to spray this firewall. All right, we got this sucker all masked up. About 10 man hours to get it to this point. So a lot of masking, but you have to do a really good job masking. Otherwise, you're gonna end up with paint in places where paint isn't supposed to be. So we are 100% ready to roll. We're gonna start painting on this firewall here. So 00 Dave is camera shy and wouldn't let me interview him about his paint job here. But man, he did a good job on this thing. It is slick and shiny and just looking proper. So super excited to see this thing all unmasked, but we're gonna have to wait a couple days because tomorrow this thing needs to sit and dry all day, and then on Friday I will mask this up and unmask some of this stuff here in the front, and we will paint all of the front suspension underneath the cab and get all that done. And then I can't wait to get this all unmasked and see what this baby looks like. So while the firewall was sitting yesterday curing, I went ahead and got everything else here masked up to be able to paint the frame. This thing is just taking a ton of masking. To do it right, you gotta mask. I also don't wanna get a bunch of paint on my lift and stuff, so it takes a little bit longer than if this was just a dedicated paint shop. But pretty much ready to go on painting the frame. I just have to throw some paper over the firewall that we just painted, trying to give that as much time as possible to cure out before we throw any tape on there. I don't want to have any problems. And I realized this morning as I was prepping everything, I said, there's one thing that I necessarily didn't forget to do, but I overlooked. And I thought that this would be a really nice feature for Jordan, so let me show you what I did. If you've ever tried to jack up a four-wheel drive truck before, you know that you can't jack it up by just sticking the jack here in the center. It'll always try to pick this side up before it picks that side up. So you got to stick the jack underneath the pumpkin, jack this side up, and you got to come over here and jack this side up, and it's a pain. So I put a jack post on the center of the axle here, so that way he can throw a jack underneath of that thing and jack it right up. And basically I just did a piece of 120 wall tubing and I sleeved it with a tube insert for like a heim joint. And then I sleeved the heim joint so that way we could put a pin in it. So that way he can actually have a front push bar now too, if he wanted to pull the truck forward. I know that there's been some situations at my house where when my truck's not running and I'm trying to jock it around, I would have loved to have had a front push bar. So this will give him front and rear pushing capabilities. And then I'll just make him a little hook for his trailer so that when he winches this thing in his trailer, the hook will just go on here. He'll put that pin in and he'll be able to winch that thing in the trailer real nice and easy. So a little bit of a dual purpose mount, but will come in super handy for him. So now that that's done, I'm gonna get this firewall masked up, and next thing we will be painting. Painting is all done. Give you a little sneak peek there. Before I show you guys this, I'll probably unmask it because it's really hard to see in here. But I told you guys I would let you know what I was using, and of course it's gonna be backwards. It's Performance Coatings. It's a commercial single stage enamel. It's made by PPG. We get it at our local KOI. So if you're like in Kentucky, Ohio, or Indiana, you can get it from there. But I imagine since it's a PPG that you could get it from any rep, any PPG rep. But it's good stuff. It has a catalyst. You can reduce it, you can brush paint it, you can spray it. It's really easy to use. It feels really good, and it's pretty cheap. I think it's about 120 bucks for a gallon, and it took us a half a gallon to do all this. So I'm gonna get this thing unmasked real quick and show you guys what we got here. All right, so here she is. Everything all nice and shiny. I will throw up a little before and after picture that I took so you guys can really understand how much better this stuff looks. But underneath of it here really doesn't do you a whole lot of justice. So let me go to the engine compartment and show you guys what it really looks like. Are you guys ready for this? Hello! This thing is shining bright. I am so happy with the way that this has turned out, and I can't wait to show it to Newman. I'm sure he's going to be really happy about it too. But this really shows you the appreciation of how much better this thing looks. Obviously, I still have some stuff to untape with it, but I want to wait and untape some of that wiring after this stuff cures out. This is Friday. This video is going to come out Monday, but I want to let this thing sit all weekend long and cure out. It's supposed to be warm this weekend, so that'll be good. That'll help this thing cure, but man, just so much better than what it was. Now, obviously, I didn't paint the steering box because we're going to be changing that. I guess that's not necessarily obvious, but that steering box is from '93, and steering is an area that we're not going to skimp on with a race truck. The tie rod bar is going to be replaced, so just it got paint just from painting the axle, the front axle, and then of course the drag link will get replaced. So basically everything steering related that's not new, like our nice steering shaft here, is going to get replaced. So that's why none of that stuff was concerned with painting it. And then when we do the hubs, I'll probably have to get in there and touch up where the big bulky brakes hide, where I couldn't get in there to paint. But overall, man, I'm just extremely happy with the way that this turned out. It really took this truck from being a nice truck to a really nice truck. So super stoked. Hopefully Newman will be too. Happy to get this paint part of the project done and get rolling on this thing. My next plan is going to be to get the master cylinder. Like I mentioned before in a previous video, we're doing manual brakes on this. So the very next thing I'll do is get the master cylinder, get it mounted to the firewall, get the brake lines ran, probably go ahead and do the front hubs and race brakes. I'll show you guys all that stuff. And then after that, then we can get the motor back in it, get the transmission in it, and actually do final assembly stuff on this thing. So I'm not gonna stretch this video out any longer. We accomplished a whole lot in this video, so we're gonna wrap it up here. So, like always, guys, appreciate you watching. If you're new to the channel, click that subscribe button, give this video a like, drop a comment, let me know what you think of this thing, how we're doing on it, and we'll see you guys next time.